The Fantastic Beasts films left us on a massive cliffhanger. The Dark Wizard Gellert Grindelwald is still at large, and the movies just ended. Fortunately for us, we know how his story plays out, and we can attribute that to established Harry Potter lore. But as for the films, those are over. So what I want to know is, what happened to him along the way? What happened after 1932? What happened to Gellert Grindelwald? Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Harry Potter Theory. As early as the very first installment of the Harry Potter series, we're given some hints as to what happens to Gellert Grindelwald. The first example being when Harry views a chocolate frog card with Dumbledore's name on it. Albus Dumbledore, currently headmaster of Hogwarts, considered by many the greatest wizard of modern times. Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the Dark Wizard Grindelwald in 1945. And there it is, famous defeat of Dark Wizard Grindelwald in 1945. But Secrets of Dumbledore ends in 1932, which leaves a whopping 13 years entirely unaccounted for. Beyond 1945, there's also the rest of his life. So, what did he get up to? As Grindelwald's power grew, many believed that Albus Dumbledore would be the only one capable of stopping him. However, due to a blood pact made in their youth, Dumbledore was, for many years, unable to directly confront Grindelwald. This magical agreement, forged in their ambitious youth, had a binding effect that prevented either of them from directly facing the other in combat or conflict for many years. This constraint was a source of great frustration and regret for Dumbledore, who recognized the imminent threat posed by Grindelwald's increasingly radical and dangerous ideology. The impact of the Blood Pact became particularly significant during the rise of Grindelwald's power and the ensuing wizarding conflict, as Dumbledore found himself unable to confront Grindelwald directly. Meanwhile, Grindelwald, freed from the constraint of the Blood Pact that limited Dumbledore's direct intervention, took full advantage of the situation to rally supporters and build an army to further his dark ambitions. But in 1927, something big happened. Newt Scamander was able to steal the vial containing the Blood Pact from Grindelwald and pass it on to Dumbledore for safekeeping. This daring act set the stage for a potential breakthrough in the long-standing impasse between Dumbledore and Grindelwald, as the stolen vial held the key to breaking the binding magic of the Blood Pact. 5 years later, in 1932, the confrontation between Dumbledore and Grindelwald took a decisive turn when Dumbledore's younger brother, Aberforth, entered the fray. Grindelwald's dangerous intentions became apparent as he sought to harm Credence Barebone, a troubled young wizard who played a significant role in the unfolding events. In this moment, Dumbledore and Aberforth united, putting their own grievances aside to thwart Grindelwald. And it was this crucial intervention by Dumbledore and Aberforth in defense of Credence that had unforeseen consequences. In the heat of the battle, the immense power and intensity of their magic brought about a momentous breakthrough: the breaking of the Blood Pact. The breaking of the Blood Pact signaled a shift in the power dynamics between Dumbledore and Grindelwald. It provided Dumbledore with the liberation needed to challenge Grindelwald openly and directly, utilizing his formidable magical abilities to counteract the Dark Wizard's treacherous influence. And that's sort of where things were left off, with Grindelwald thwarted and making his escape. But if you thought peace followed Grindelwald's temporary defeat, you'd be very wrong. Grindelwald's defeat at the election for Supreme Mugwump was a turning point in the war, because it allowed Wizarding Society to see what he really was. For a long time, Grindelwald was regarded as a nefarious character, but at the time of the election, he was still very much playing the political game and trying to come across as something that he wasn't. Not everyone knew of his darker side. Grindelwald's true nature and the full extent of his malevolent intentions may not have been widely known or understood, and while some individuals, particularly those who had directly opposed or witnessed his actions, may have perceived him as a threat, Grindelwald maintained a charismatic and persuasive facade that allowed him to garner support and followers for his cause. Grindelwald's ability to cloak his darker ambitions behind compelling rhetoric and promises of a new world order led many to view him as a revolutionary with noble aspirations. His skillful manipulation of facts and his talent for swaying public opinion allowed him to cultivate a sense of legitimacy and attract individuals who were drawn to his vision of wizarding supremacy. As a result, the perception of Grindelwald in 1932 was likely varied, with some recognizing his dangerous nature and others embracing his ideology without fully comprehending the implications of his radical agenda. But after his actions at the election, he had been exposed. This forced him to retreat, temporarily, and begin to devise a plan for how he would proceed moving forward. At this point, he didn't even try to play the nice guy card anymore, and instead placed his focus on appealing to the more nefarious members of Wizarding Society, radical types that he felt he could more easily coerce into joining his cause. And by implementing this strategy, it didn't take long for him to build a following once again. He managed to rally support through a combination of strategic manipulation and persuasive rhetoric. Utilizing his charisma and captivating speaking abilities, Grindelwald aimed to appeal to the sentiments and fears of wizards and witches who were disillusioned with the existing order. He skillfully painted a picture of a future where wizards would assert their dominance over muggles, promising a world in which the magical community would no longer be forced to hide or live in fear. The very same type of language that once convinced Albus Dumbledore. For 13 long years, he built his army stronger, spreading his influence across the wizarding world and covertly recruiting followers who were enamored with his persuasive rhetoric and vision of a new world order, all while amassing the resources and power necessary to orchestrate his grand design. Meanwhile, the Second World War began just as Grindelwald had foretold, and this prompted him to declare open war upon the world, something that then Minister for Magic Hector Fawley didn't take seriously enough. Fawley was later removed from office due to his complete lack of response to Grindelwald's actions and replaced with Leonard Spencer Moon. And by the time 1945 rolled around, the public outcry against Grindelwald became too strong. The imminent threat of Grindelwald and his followers was palpable, and the rumor circulating around the wizarding world was that only one man could defeat him, Albus Dumbledore. While I busied myself with the training of young wizards, Grindelwald was raising an army. They say he feared me, and perhaps he did, but less, I think, than I feared him. It was the truth I feared. You see, I never knew which of us, in that last horrific fight, had actually cast the curse that killed my sister. I think he knew it. I think he knew what frightened me. I delayed meeting him until finally, it would have been too shameful to resist any longer. People were dying and he seemed unstoppable, and I had to do what I could. And so, on a rainy November 2nd, 1945, Albus found Grindelwald and challenged him to a duel. The exact details of the duel are far and few between, but British pureblood wizard Elphias Doge described their duel as the greatest of all time, and that no duel ever matched it. They say still that no wizarding duel ever matched that between Dumbledore and Grindelwald in 1945. Those who witnessed it have written of the terror and the awe they felt as they watched these two extraordinary wizards do battle. Dumbledore's Triumph and its consequences for the wizarding world are considered a turning point in magical history. Given that both wizards were immensely powerful, I suspect that the allegiance of the Elder Wand had something to do with the outcome. I think that Dumbledore is more powerful on paper, but I suspect that the Elder Wand may have evened the playing field. We know that Grindelwald physically possessed the wand, but we also know that the Elder Wand is rather temperamental. Given that Grindelwald ended up surviving the duel, I suspect that Dumbledore may have simply ended up disarming him in some way, gaining allegiance of the wand and gaining an even larger advantage. As for the spectacle that was the duel itself, I expect it was an impressive display of elemental magic. Both Grindelwald and Dumbledore are known for utilizing this type of magic in dueling settings, and I suspect that they both pulled out every spell in their arsenal. As for Dumbledore's triumph over Grindelwald, well, there are a number of theories out there. If you want more details on that, check out my video, How Dumbledore Defeated Grindelwald, 5 Theories. But at the end of the day, however he achieved it, Albus Dumbledore, the wizarding world's only hope, finally defeated Grindelwald and gained allegiance of the Elder Wand, ushering in an era of peace, at least for a little while. Following his defeat, Grindelwald was confined to the uppermost cell in the tallest tower within Ermengarde, the very same prison that he had built for his enemies. His cell, which featured a narrow window and suitable for entrance or exit, housed a basic bed and sparse bedding. It remains unclear whether any other individuals were incarcerated at Ermengarde during Grindelwald's imprisonment, but it is likely that he was the sole detainee towards the end of his 53-year confinement. Despite his physical deterioration, Grindelwald received sustenance and care throughout his time in captivity. indicating the presence of a food supply and a provider. In his later years, Grindelwald engaged in a lot of self-reflection, reconsidering his deeds and the revolution he had led. It's believed that he later expressed regret and shame for the atrocities that he and his followers had perpetrated in both the magical and non-magical realms. I guess that's what 53 years in your own prison cell will do to you. However, by the time 1945 rolled around, and Grindelwald's own reign of terror was brought to an end, Voldemort was just getting started in his own dark pursuits. The defeat of Grindelwald only meant that there would be a brief pause in tyranny. And at one stage in Voldemort's resurgence, he becomes obsessed with acquiring the fabled Deathly Hallow, the Elder Wand. Voldemort then tracks down Gregorovitch and, via torture and legitimacy, figures out that the wand was stolen by an unidentifiable thief. It's not until Voldemort later arrives at Godric's Hollow that he finds a picture of the same thief in Bathilda Bagshot's house, finally uncovering the thief's identity, Gellert Grindelwald. And so, in 1998, 53 years post-defeat, Grindelwald awoke to discover an unexpected visitor in his prison cell, Lord Voldemort. The cryptic conversation between the two is shared intermittently during the Malfoy Manor scene. The emaciated figure stirred beneath its thin blanket and rolled over toward him, eyes opening in a skull of a face. The frail man sat up, great sunken eyes fixed upon him, upon Voldemort, and then he smiled. Most of his teeth were gone. "So you have come. I thought you would, one day. But your journey was pointless. I never had it. You lie." As Harry spoke, his scar burned worse than ever, and for a few seconds he looked down, not upon the wand maker, but on another man who was just as old, just as thin, but laughing scornfully. "Kill me then, Voldemort. I welcome death, but my death will not bring you what you seek. There is so much you do not understand." He felt Voldemort's fury, but as Hermione screamed again, he shut it out, returning to the cellar and the horror of his own present. At once, Harry's scar felt as though it had split open again. His true surroundings vanished. He was Voldemort, and the skeletal wizard before him was laughing toothlessly at him. He was enraged at the summons he felt. He had warned them. He had told them to summon him for nothing less than Potter. "Kill me then," demanded the old man. "You will not win. You cannot win. That wand will never, ever be yours." And Voldemort's fury broke. A burst of green light filled the prison room, and the frail old body was lifted from its hard bed and then fell back lifeless, and Voldemort returned to the window, his wrath barely controllable. Despite facing the most formidable Dark Wizard in history, and the only Dark Wizard more powerful and dangerous than himself while being defenseless, Grindelwald refused to divulge the whereabouts of the Elder Wand. He taunted Voldemort openly, deriding his craving for the wand. As Voldemort's impatience grew, his anger erupted when he sensed his Death Eater summoning him in conjunction with Grindelwald's final taunts. Ultimately, Voldemort put an end to Grindelwald's life with the Killing Curse, despite the latter's claims that Voldemort could kill him, but would never possess the Elder Wand. In his final moments, Grindelwald lied to Voldemort about the Elder Wand because he had a change of heart and aimed to prevent its acquisition. And it was this demonstration of remorse and his endeavor to thwart Voldemort's pursuit of the wand that illustrated Grindelwald's bid for redemption. He may have died as an old, toothless, decrepit man, imprisoned in his own jail cell, but at least he died doing the right thing. And that's it for this video. Had you ever wondered what the later chapters of Grindelwald's life look like? What happens to him after Secrets of Dumbledore? Let me know down in the comment section below. Until next time, remember, it does not do to dwell on dreams and forget to live.